I explored the red sandstone bluffs yesterday and violated my own rule and actually did take a little psilocybin, just a tiny bit, just to help me sort of understand the landscape. And since today we're going to talk about ecology, it was sort of, I figured, part of the business end of things to do that. The reason I went to the effort to get the aerial photograph of Rustler's Valley up so you could see it was simply because on my very light mushroom trip yesterday, I went down the face of the bluff and then up onto the bluff, and then I just sat there, and I had no real expectation. I mean, I was roughly interested in the botany, and then I just sat there and smoked a bomber and sort of considered the situation, and several thoughts came to me of a somewhat surprising to me, and it was about the land. And I've been puzzled ever since I've gotten here, because this whole journey has had a kind of funny personal element in it, in that this place is more like where I grew up than any place I've ever been. And I keep telling myself it's not so, that I'm not paying enough attention, and that there is nothing more irritating than the tourist who carries with him always the assumption of his home. But on the other hand, my relationship to the place where I grew up was not casual. I was a rock hunter, a fossil hunter. I spent a lot of time alone in the sandstone country, looking at it from a distance like this, you know, and picking at it and climbing around. And I can't shake the impression that I'm within 50 miles of where I was born. And if any of you ever have the opportunity, go to Western Colorado, to places like Montrose, Delta County, Pitkin County. It's this to a T. It's the land that is the same. Of course, the plants are totally different. And I concentrated yesterday a lot on looking at the identifiably exotic South African flora, which I'm sure you all take for granted, but things like the cabbage tree and the Pelospelus and the Caryodopsis, the little Caryodopsis plants up on the rocks and all of that. Very interesting. But then I had a sort of a hallucination about the place, or an understanding, and that's why I brought the map in. And this is an aerial photograph of the general area. And this is the valley. The house and all the complex and the buildings and everything is here, and the big stone bluff behind us is this thing. And maybe you were aware, but maybe you weren't all aware of how thin it is, how it's just a knife of stone. It's not a mountain range that begins behind us. It's a knife of stone that is quite as clear on the other side as it is on this side, because we hiked up and looked over, and there's more cultivation and so forth and so on. So I was thinking about how this is roughly a round valley, an enclosed valley, and valleys like that are always gather energy. It's like a trivial observation. They gather energy. The Kathmandu Valley is such a valley, a round valley. The Valley of the Sibundoy in Colombia, that Schultes called the site of the most highly evolved narcotic consciousness on Earth. He was speaking of the Brugmansia shaman, is a valley very similar to this, the Covelo Valley in Northern California. Anyway, not to put too fine a point on it, but my impression of this thing yesterday very strongly was that it's alive, and it's a beast. It's specifically and very obviously a dragon. And it guards this valley, and there's a very strong sense of its personality and intelligence. And I wonder if the local people haven't always perceived it that way. Certainly in Australia, it would have that kind of a character. So, that was just a couple of grams of mushrooms, no purpose, and walking around, and suddenly there was this whole new dimension to things. And this gives it very clearly. This is another whole new dimension to things, to look down on things. This is the shaman's eye view of Rustler's Valley. And the whole thing is clearly under the protection of this thing. And I'm sure in the late afternoon, this must photograph very clearly from orbit, because it would throw a long, extended shadow. So anyway, that's about as woo-woo as I'll get. It was a personal observation. I felt this thing very strongly. Beginner's luck. So, where we were, and let us continue.